The Caribbean has some of the highest rates of overweight and obesity in the Americas.
Parents are usually meticulous about what goes into their children's mouths from 0 to 1 year. But then something happens after 1 year when we say to them, eat from the family pot. Right. Somehow the family pot extends to snacks, both sugary and salty, soft drinks and candies of all descriptions.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
WESN.
And we're back here on Talking Point. This is Shaw Michael Small coming in once again on this morning. Apologies for our tardiness, but it is with good reason. We have with us the one and only political leader of the MSJ, Mr. David Abdullah, here to speak about a couple of topics, well, including one topic which, Mr. Abdullah, the public has been requesting we have a conversation on. But before we get into that, I would imagine the recent budget, that is what is for the citizens of TNT. As much as there's a lot of stuff happening in the rest of the world, the recent budget is potentially the most impactful thing right this minute. First of all, good morning. Welcome to Talking Point.
Good morning, Shawn Michael, and thanks for having me. My apologies for running a bit late this morning.
That's all right. That's all right, because we haven't gotten your commentary yet, so I just wanted to first get your first impressions of the budget before we get into anything else.
Yeah, sure. So the budget was partly political and partly economic in terms of budgetary measures and so on. So there was this was supposed to be expected first budget of the UNC, first budget by Minister Tank, who was Minister of Finance after 10 years of the PNM. The UNC had done a whole lot of promising in the manifesto, so they wanted to make some political statements. So a lot of what he said, or significant amount of what he said, was political. The whole introduction about promise made, promise kept, and so on and so on. So that was part of it. So you have to kind of strip away that rhetoric to try to get a clear understanding. Now, there are some measures or some policies that he announced or some decisions that he announced that will benefit people. For example, the $1 reduction in the price of fuel, super, that will assist motorists who use super fuel. It won't help those who use premium, although I'm sure that the price of premium is also being subsidized, not by the government or state, but actually by owners of vehicles that use premium, because I'm sure the price of premium is above that of market price. But he decided to just go with the super, which is, I suppose, a significant amount. The other one would be the 10% offer that the CPO, Chief Personal Officer, has been instructed to offer the PSA. And it should not only be the PSA, it should also include the National Union of Government and Federated Workers, although no mention was made of the daily paid workers represented by that union, because NUGFW did not settle the negotiations with the last government for the 2-3-year periods, 2013, 16 or 14, 17, 17, 19, or whatever those two periods were. So that offer obviously would, be a good news for thousands of public servants, because they've been long suffering for a pay increase. That was positive. The announcement of the removal of VAT on food items, I think, ended up as a bit of a damp squib, because when the list was actually published in the newspaper a few days ago, there were not that many items that of essential food items that were not previously zero rated. So there was some salt and some other items and so on that has come off, but it wasn't like a long list of food items. But whatever ease up in people's grocery price will, of course, be appreciated by consumers who have been facing higher and higher prices while incomes have been not going up, or if they went up at all, by very little bit. Now, the thing is that we now have to depend on the groceries, supermarkets, and so on to be fair, and therefore to reduce the price on the shelf by 50%, which is the VAT amount, and not leave the price up and then pocket the difference. There will be some unscrupulous people who will do that, but we hope that the majority will reduce the price on a few items that have been zero rated, reduce the price by 15%. One of the problems that we have in this country is that we don't have a strong consumer culture. And I had advocated very many moons ago, or about 15, 20 years ago, on behalf of Fight on the Federation of Independent Trade Unions and NGOs, that the Consumer Affairs Division of the Ministry of Trade should publish the fair prices, not just, they sometimes used to, I haven't seen it for a long time, publish the price of the same basket of items in different supermarkets, so that if you go by supermarket X, you will see an item for $8, you go by supermarket Y, you see it for $8.25, supermarket Z, $9. They used to publish that, so people could use that information maybe to go by the supermarket that has its cheapest. The thing about it was, interestingly, when that happened, way back when, 2008 or thereabouts, the same supermarket chain published different prices in different branches, right? So West Mall prices were higher than St. Augustine prices of the same supermarket company, and they've said, well, the people at West Mall who shop at West Mall could afford to pay more and will pay more. But we want to see the fair prices published. In other words, what is the cost of at the point of purchase in whatever country or manufacture here? What is therefore the cost of freight and insurance and transport, and what is a fair markup, and therefore what should be a fair price? And if we see what the ministry publishes as a fair price, we could then determine whether prices are in fact, consumers are being overcharged for various items. So that's the issue of VAT. Now, on the other hand, there's some negatives in that the increase in the NIS pensionable age, while I understand why, and it's a painful issue because more than 20 years ago, when I chaired the Labour and Social Security Subcommittee of Vision 2020, and I was a member of the core committee of Vision 2020, our subcommittee recommended that persons who are self-employed be actively included in the NIS net. And that would therefore have meant that many more people would have been contributing to the NIS, and therefore there would have been a larger pool of investable funds, and many of the self-employed people being younger and so on, contributing for a longer period of time. The fund would not have gotten into the cash crisis that it is now in, or will be facing in 10 years, as the case may be, according to the actuarial reports. The other thing that we recommended was that the government at the time when we were flush with revenues from natural gas, should have used some of those revenues to create an old age or senior citizens pension fund, which could have been managed and invested by an independent body in the same way like the Heritage and Stabilization Fund or the NIB is managed and so on, so that those funds would have accrued interest over time. And therefore, the number of people who are on old age or senior citizens pensions could have been funded, if not in totally, but significantly out of this fund, rather than out of government recurrent expenditure, because that's a huge chunk of the government's budget every year. Those recommendations were ignored, unfortunately. So we're now paying the price for that. And one of the issues that many people have is those people who are, say, 55 and over and would be expecting to retire with their NIS pension at age 60, now have to push on for several more years and contribute more, so that their expected income at 60 will not be there. It might come in at 62 or 63, depending on what age you are at now. And they would have contributed for many more years to the NIS. So they're being penalized in a sense, and that really isn't very fair on them. So those are some of the things. With the levy on the banks, that is not necessarily going to help clients of banks. You know, when you go into a bank and do a transaction over the counter, you pay a fee, and you leave your money in savings in the bank, and every month they deduct some money out of it. All of those charges and fees will not be reduced as a result of this levy. So what may in fact happen is that the banks might find ways of trying to increase their profitability. I would have preferred to have seen two things. One, increase in the tax on profits, because that is a more direct way and more transparent way of getting income, rather than a levy of a % of their assets. Because if the banks therefore decide to shift assets to another country, in another subsidiary and so on, we wouldn't get the benefit of that. And I would have asked the central bank to meet with the bankers to reduce charges and fees and improve or change the spread between the interest rate, what you get on your savings, and the interest that you have to pay on loans. The issue of property tax, which has come back in a different form, with the rental, the surcharge on rental income, may very well see landlords passing on that cost to their tenants, including businesses that rent and so on, stores and whatever, and they may then find ways or means of passing that extra cost on to consumers. So these things have implications. And there are other things about the budget that we could talk about that are emerging now, because there was no proper budget debate, but in the Standing Finance Committee of the House, which goes through each line item of expenditure for each ministry and statutory body and so on, where some things are coming out. For example, there was no allocation made in the estimates of expenditure for the 10% salary increase that has been offered or is being offered to public servants, which means that therefore the expenditure of the government, once that is settled during this fiscal year, will increase beyond that which is budgeted, and therefore the budget deficit will increase. We also heard that there's no explicit provision for CPEP and URP workers who lost their jobs. They have to go through this process of applying to this job application process. But that is problematic because you have, maybe 30, 40,000 people applying for 18,000 jobs. Who is going to get the job that is on offer? That is going to be an issue, I'm sure, going forward. So I'll stop there. There may be some other things, Sean, that you might want to ask me on about.
I want to go back because you kind of touched on it on a couple of points. One, on the sense of to pass on whatever price reductions that might be realized, like with the VAT removal of what few basic food items was on that list, as well as the price of gas, of course, that should be passed on. But also, as you mentioned, with the property tax in a different name, and to some extent you could maybe apply this to the bank levy, and you could apply this, I believe, of course, it already happened with regards to the customs and excise duties on alcohol, not passing on the increases to the consumer. And the Minister of Finance, he basically pleaded to the various private institutions to not pass on price increases, but this is one of those things where I do have to wonder, what was your opinion when he made that plea? Because to me, if you affect the entire industry, there's very little incentive to say, oh, well, I will be more competitive if I don't do it, because you're reducing the margins, and certain industries, we might be surprised. It's not so much the margins are big, it's that the market share could more or less make up for that, and the wiggle room you might have. Certain renters might not be able to absorb the property tax or the rental tax, right? I don't know about the alcohol producing companies, but it is what it is. I mean, I think in the long run, no one's going to say, how could you tax the people's alcohol? Well, it's a luxury, it's not necessarily a necessity. But renting, for a lot of people, it's not a choice. You have to find somewhere to live. So do you think that the minister had a realistic approach? Because he came after the fact saying, please don't do this. But generally speaking, you put certain incentives in front of business, and it will, or certain obstacles, and it will react a certain way to those interests.
Yeah, you're right. And so the minister obviously had to try to close the gap between his revenue and expenditure, and therefore had to find some ways of raising revenue, having regard to the fact that the oil production is not good, gas production is not good, petrochemical plants are down. Those are a large part of the revenue. And as I'm on that, I think that the minister's estimation of the oil price at $73.25 a barrel is too high given the current global market situation where the price of oil is hovering around $60 or just above US a barrel. And then he has $4.25 per MMBTU for natural gas. And I also think that may be too high. So if his estimates of revenue based on oil and gas prices are too high, it therefore means he's going to be in even greater difficulty to get close to closing the fiscal gap, the gap between revenue and expenditure. And therefore you have to find revenue somewhere. And one of the easiest ways, I think he found easy ways to get additional revenue. So taxes on alcohol, well, the excise duties, that was an easy one. When I first heard the budget being read, I really thought that he was only referring to imported alcohol. And that I would have supported so that we would not spend so much foreign exchange on imported alcohol. And that will, I think, would have been beneficial to the local industry, but also saving forex and so on, because we don't need to drink imported alcohol when we can produce good local wines, and we could therefore encourage our small, micro enterprise firms and individuals, entrepreneurs who are doing some very nice local wines and so on. That is what we should be encouraging, and discourage the importation. But it was an across the board increase on excise duties, and that obviously means that it's for those who do have a little bit of extra money and want to spend a little bit of money when the month end comes, they're going to have to put out more for their entertainment by way of alcohol. And similarly, the banks and the rental, the banks are easier because the banks publish their financial statements, and therefore you could target how much their assets are, what their assets are, and therefore you could calculate that quite easily. With respect to the property rentals, it requires landlords to register, and if they don't register, you then have to go and find out who is registered, who isn't registered, and that might take some time. And then will they declare the full amount of their rental income, because they have to pay a certain amount. I just find it 3.5% of the gross annual rental income. So it is not even in tiers to say, okay, well, there are two tiers: 2.5% of gross annual rental income of 20,000 or less, and then 3.5 annual rental income above 20,000. So if you are renting a property for $2,000 a month, right, the gross annual rental income is $24,000, and therefore you're paying 3.5% of that.
It's a low threshold.
And Yeah, and therefore, if you are renting an office building for a couple $1 million a year, that's 3.5% of that. And so he did not say how much he intends to get from that. He said 70 million from the one-time registration fee of $2,500, but he didn't say how much he expects to get, because I don't think he knows exactly how many buildings are being rented and at what price, and it therefore requires individuals to faithfully declare what their rental income is. That's going to be a little bit problematic going forward. And then you have some people maybe who invested. I know you know Tobago well, Sean,
Yeah.
and therefore a lot of people, Trinidadians would have built villas, what we call villas, homes for rent. This weekend is Carnival weekend. I'm surprised you're not across there already. In Tobago.
I try to stay away from the busy periods.
I hear you. Makes sense. But a lot of Trinidadians going across will be renting villas, right? And however much those villas rent for, depending on the size and location and so on. And some people have invested that way in order to get some additional income for their retirement years. And so they're now going to be taxed on that, effectively as a tax. So all of these things are going to be a little bit problematic. There's an electricity surcharge of 5 cents per kilowatt hour for commercial and industrial customers. That would push up, of course, electricity bills for retail outlets, retail stores, supermarkets, malls, all of that. The electricity bill will go up. I don't know how much it will go up by, because I haven't tried to do calculations on it. And again, we hope this is one area where the business community, or in other words, if your electricity bill goes up by 10%, just for argument's sake, because of this 5 cents per kilowatt hour, you can't then say we're increasing our price to customers by 10%, because electricity might only be 5% of your overall expenditure. Yes?
Right.
So, but you know how people are. Well, electricity going up by 10%, so prices going up by 10%. That is not the real calculation. That is where we need to be vigilant in that regard. Yeah. The other thing, he put a lot of betting on getting Dragon gas field going. But as we heard yesterday from the Vice President of Venezuela, who's also the Minister of Energy, that Trinidad and Tobago will have to pay for every molecule of gas that it gets, which is not, of course, pay Venezuela, which is not, of course, what the U.S. OFAC license would stipulate. So it doesn't seem like that Dragon gas field is going to get anywhere fast at this moment. Well, and therefore our gas supply will continue to be very limited relative to the demand for gas.
Well, before we transition, but we do have to transition to our topic, I just want to close with the budget conversation with this. I think most of us expected similar levels of revenue and expenditure as years gone by, because a lot of that's not going to change, right? You have recurring payments that you have to make, the debt financing, salaries, etc., etc. The revenue position, it's not like we saw multiple new projects just miraculously spring up in the last 4 months to really make a big difference with that. Now, the details and the numbers seemingly were a lot different to what was reported, say, the previous budget with the non-oil and gas versus oil revenue and the levels. But the overall total numbers were what we expected, I would imagine, except maybe the deficit. So I kind of want to frame it in this way. It seems as though the minister, would you agree? Because my initial reaction was, hey, that's a really small deficit. How did you manage to pull that off, under $4 billion? Would you agree that perhaps some of these things, like not making any provisions for the 10% and so on, it's implying that, look, there are going to be a lot of other things that's going to potentially apply to this deficit. This is not necessarily the true deficit. But the flip side is, it's not as though a higher deficit is outside the realm of what most people would have expected anyway. And it's kind of strange that it looks like they're trying to hide a larger deficit, but I don't even understand the need for it, because this was basically the position we're in. And to say that you're going to magically fix it in 6 months, and we're already seeing signs that it's not going to stay at 3 billion. It's probably going to go up, especially with the oil and gas price estimates being what they are. I don't think any third party has agreed with it. What would you make of that?
I agree with you. There's one area that is a bit unknown, and that is that there are a lot of taxes that do not get collected every year. In other words, and those have been estimated. And one couple of ministers of finance have said it's as much as between $8 and $15 billion a year. That's a huge amount, right? Now, the last government was putting all of its eggs in one basket, which was the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority. That has now come to an end. This government has said that it is pursuing vigorously reform of the Board of Inland Revenue, or in terms of more resources, human resources, which they don't employ. The employment is really done through the statutory bodies, Director of Personnel Administration, CPO, and that kind, those bodies, the service commissions. So whether or not they can get additional people into the BIR and into customs and get the systems modernized and so on, that could result in a fair amount of additional revenue. I can't quantify that amount, and it's interesting that the minister did not indicate what he expects to get as a result of those administrative and reform type measures. When I was on the Economic Development Advisory Board, I had begun to work, one or two of us, and I didn't complete it, which was unfortunate, on some recommendations to get the BIR up to speed in terms of collecting all the taxes that should be collected from individuals and companies and so on. And so it is possible to increase revenue, but I can't say by how much and how quickly that will happen. It will be, I suppose, in 6 months' time, the midterm budget review, we will get some update from the minister, both in terms of his revenue expectations and the new measures like the various surcharges and levies and so on, and also the realistic oil and gas prices and levels of production, and what he's getting by way of additional income taxes from those who are supposed to be paying as a result of the reforms and modernization, or the strengthening of the capacity of BIR and customs. So that is unknown. Now, we also spoke about dealing with transfer pricing, but that is not going to happen in the next 6-8 months. They're going to have to work out the system, which have been talked about for donkey's years. And these are multinational corporations that are ripping off the country by selling the gas to a subsidiary at one price at which we get taxes, and then that subsidiary sells it to another subsidiary of the same, or puts it out on the market at a higher price, and therefore the multinational is really ripping us off and getting gravy that way. So that transfer pricing, if he deals with that, will gain significant additional revenue, but that's not going to happen in the short term.
Well, speaking about oil and gas revenue, as you mentioned, there's the whole situation with Dragon Gas, which it was interesting politically how the various parties approached the situation, and now it seems as though both the UNC as well as their predecessor, the PNM, they are looking at the Dragon field deal to try to get a source of new gas. Of course, we had that situation with the expected plant shut down today, with one of the I can't remember, the Nutrien, I believe it is.
Nutrien,
yeah.
Nutrien, yes, ammonia and urea producer, yeah.
But the problem is the Dragon deal, unfortunately, is not just a bilateral situation. One could argue it's 2 to 3 bilateral situations, because it's not as though all the players meet at the same time. So there's TNT in the United States and Venezuela, Venezuela and TNT. Now, I think, okay, we need to take a quick break, and we'll continue the conversation, right, as we get into this topic here, because there is, of course, the loss of life and the political reality. Stay tuned, we'll be right back after this.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios, but they've stood by us even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
My name is Dr. Joanne Williams-Carroll, and I am the Director of Behavioral and Mental Health at the Community Hospital. At the Community Hospital, we believe in nurturing mind, body, and soul. Through our counseling and chaplaincy program, we will provide you with support and strength you need to help with your mental and emotional well-being.
Give us a call.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
Where good private health care is affordable.
Low energy? Heart concerns? Migraines slowing you down? It's time to take control of your health. Join Wellness Unlocked, the series that brings expert advice and real solutions for a healthier you. In our latest episode, learn how Jameson CoQ10 can help support heart health, boost energy, and even reduce migraines. Get the science, the stories, and the steps to power up your health with CoQ10. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and start your wellness journey today.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
The Caribbean has some of the highest rates of overweight and obesity in the Americas.
Parents are usually meticulous about what goes into their children's mouths from 0 to 1 year. But then something happens after 1 year when we say to them, eat from the family pot.
Right.
Somehow the family pot extends to snacks, both sugary and salty, soft drinks and candies of all descriptions.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm not to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have 2. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the
not no.
Let's go to the last part.
waking up early just to catch your favorite cartoons? WESN brings back those magical mornings with Retro Saturdays.
Thus, the Powerpuff Girls were born!
Where the young at heart relive the fun. Join us every Saturday from 8 a.m. to 12 noon, only on WESN, the content capital.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
Money is something we all deal with, but how many of us truly understand it? What if you could make better decisions with your money? Decisions that secure your future, protect your family, and bring you peace of mind. I'm Darren Jacobs, and I'm here to help you make sense of your dollars. Welcome to Dollars and Cents, the show that breaks down the financial world in ways that matter to you. No jargon, no confusion, just real conversations about money, your money. So join me every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on WESN for Dollars and Cents. We're back on talking about the WSN Connect Capital Show. Michael Small. We were supposed to have David Abdul to continue the conversation, but we haven't been able to reconnect with him just yet. So hopefully we will get a chance to do so. If not today, on another day soon. I say soon, of course, because this part of the conversation, at least one commenter was highly anticipating. So we're not trying to duck it, but hopefully we'll get him later. If not, I will start the conversation, or at least provide my commentary of it, of where we reached so far in the situation. And you may not have seen it on the broadcast just before the break, but Mr. Abdullah was to some extent agreeing with that beginning analysis that this situation, the complexity of it is the fact that, yes, we have different bilateral arrangements being played out, and they're not being done simultaneously, even though they kind of involve the same three people, just, different combinations. Now, the international side of the politics is getting a lot trickier, because I think at this point, we're seeing more action by the Americans that no longer makes it something that's a theory. Because certain acts that they've done have been provocative to the point where it's no longer targeted at drug cartels. B-52s almost have no practical value when going after drug cartels. Everything that they deployed beforehand, you could kind of understand, right? The destroyers are there to defend the amphibious assets. The amphibious assets will be, and some of the naval assets can go after drug cartels if that's the objective. Then, of course, there's the whole situation with the admiral in charge, or former admiral in charge of the Southern Command, and his early retirement, which I believe is within the same year that he took up the post. Early retirement is not necessarily of senior officers in the U.S. military, is not unheard of. But early retirement so soon arguably is. You would still have a couple years, a few years in your post before you consider retirement. This is to free up slots for juniors to have a path for advancement, which theoretically in this current generation, day and age, would have been done for the current senior leadership. So you just pay it forward. Now, I haven't seen any official sources that attribute to his resignation or leaving or stepping down or however you want to frame it to what it's been ascribed to that I've seen on social media. But that reasoning is not necessarily outside the realm of reasonableness. So we do have to consider that not everybody is keen on the acts being taken. We don't exactly know what the rules of engagement are, what the objectives are, right? We could only interpret and discern them. But however, now it seems a little bit more likely that it's not just rattle the cages and see what happens, but rather there's, and this is what I was waiting for more indicators on, because I didn't want to just assume an active effort, not just to destabilize the Maduro regime, but potentially to actively go after it in a way that would be beyond whatever legal framework they had at the time with regards to going after these suspected drug boats. So it leaves us in a very weird spot, because now we have to consider what is our value, or what value do we have with our relationship with the Americans, our relationship with Venezuela, and to a certain extent with CARICOM. Excuse me. Because right now there's a couple of things. One, of course, CARICOM is reportedly, is reported to potentially be pulling its support from TNT getting a seat on the National Security Council. That's number one. And people are saying that TNT's foreign policy decisions is not necessarily conducive to CARICOM and may then tread dangerous waters. This is basically coming from one analyst from within, a regional analyst from within CARICOM, a non-Trinbagonian. Of course, there's the whole situation of who views the recent deaths of 2 Trinidadian nationals as bad karma. As you see now, this is the consequence of supporting this act and what it is. But again, I would argue, take the nationalities out of it. We could say loss of life is wrong without it affecting us, one would hope. But what's interesting is, at the end of the day, the narratives do not want to acknowledge the international politics of the situations we all find ourselves in. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that the Prime Minister did the right thing with regards to prioritizing her relationship with the United States over Venezuela. Because look, we want the Dragon deal now. We kind of need both. We can't prefer one over the other unless the Americans are going to do the thing. But there was also something coming out of CARICOM, where the CARICOM gets up, have urged United States administration and Congress to immediately renew the hemispheric opportunity through partnership enhancement for Haiti prosperity and the Haiti Economic Lift Program Acts. Now, it's not necessarily for all of CARICOM, if this is just for Haiti, but the point is, as TNT is now learning, or at least the current administration, you can't have your cake and eat it too, dare I say CARICOM also needs to learn that you can't have your cake and eat it too. particularly with this American President Trump, who seemingly is very more simple-minded in his approach. With that, let's take a break. We'll continue conversation when we come back. Stay tuned.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios, but they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
Low energy? Heart concerns? Migraines slowing you down? It's time to take control of your health. Join Wellness Unlocked, the series that brings expert advice and real solutions for a healthier you. In our latest episode, learn how Jameson CoQ10 can help support heart health, boost energy, and even reduce migraines. Get the science, the stories, and the steps to power up your health with CoQ10. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and start your wellness journey today.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas, and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
This is 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region.
Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
The conversation with Mr. Abdullah with regards to the current Venezuelan-U.S. tension and where we fit into all of this. To some extent, at least, that's part of the conversation. We're going to have that tomorrow. Unfortunately, Mr. Abdullah was not able to continue any longer. He has a prior engagement. So first thing tomorrow, we'll get into that. And then, of course, we should have Ashraf, as usual, to continue the conversation. We do have other domestic issues to go over as well. But I do want to continue on this topic just a little bit longer, because I think this is one of those things. There are other bilateral engagements in this equation. And it's very interesting how you would think the international community, or in this case, the regional community, because the United States, Venezuela, the Caribbean, we all are essentially occupying land around the Caribbean Sea. So we might not view America as being part of the Caribbean, but regionally, they're more or less right there. Florida is sticking its toe right into Caribbean waters, right? Everybody seemingly is trying to have their cake and eat it too. Well, except the Americans. They only want one thing, but it's not necessarily the simplest and easiest concession in the world to give it to them. They're kind of bullheaded down a singular direction, it seems. Although even they themselves are trying to have their cake and eat it too. They're telling us that they are concerned about our financial future and our economic stability and all of that jazz, and handing us an OFAC 6 months license. Meanwhile, there's a very tough, strong stance on the Venezuelan regime. Of course, the implication is, especially when you put those two things together, you're almost guaranteed to require regime change for both of those things to work and coexist at the same time. As Mr. Abdullah pointed out while he was speaking about the budget with regard to the dragon gas, the Venezuelan government does not seem to be very keen to work with us over that situation, and probably will not take it easy on us on the negotiations if any deal can happen. But then you have to go further, because at the end of the day, you have to question, what is everybody's priorities in this situation? Is Venezuela's priority its international politics and fight with the United States, or its economic position? Because its economic position would say, hey, we should still take a dragon deal. However it may look, it will still benefit us. Is America's position regional stability, or wanting to topple the Maduro regime? Because if it's regional stability, while yes, the Maduro regime is a contributing factor of instability, to fight fire with a bigger fire usually doesn't make sense. But then what about CARICOM itself? Because it seems as though CARICOM wants to not necessarily be seen as a stooge or second fiddle to the Americans. There is the commitment by members of CARICOM to the Caribbean being a zone of peace, which I find narratively very strange, because CARICOM does not have the capacity to enforce this commitment in any way, shape, or form. When the rubber really hits the road, international courts only are effective after the fact. International courts could not stop Nazi Germany. Someone had to go in to stop Nazi Germany. Then you could have the Nuremberg trials afterwards. A strongly worded letter is not going to do anything here. At the end of the day, our courts' authority is enforced by force, or the implied threat of force, of the legal state monopoly, that is the police service. So CARICOM now wants to maintain a zone of peace and not necessarily just automatically fall in line with the Americans, in part because there's a whole other situation with regards to Bolivia, which is pointing to some analysts saying we're part of a small collection of conservative governments. To what extent is most of the Caribbean non-conservative? Already that distinction probably overcomplicates the situation. But here's the catch. There are certain things where, yes, CARICOM could come together, could band together, could improve our lot in life, and we could prioritize each other as a community over any external interest. Now, America being a major trading partner, it's not something that we could just quit cold turkey. But let's just say if you wanted to be politically independent from America, it would help if you had some sort of path or plan to be economically, not necessarily fully independent, but more independent. And members of CARICOM want to have their cake and eat it too. You want America to help you when you need help, but you want to dictate what it does. Technically speaking, most of the Caribbean is far removed from what's going to go on in Venezuela so far. Airstrikes of drug boats is not necessarily going to have a long-lasting negative impact so far on most of the Caribbean. If you escalate further, that's a different story. But if we're for CARICOM, why is it that the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago is the only one being called out? Because there are certain other CARICOM countries that at times, when the dynamics was Guyana and Venezuela, they didn't necessarily support Guyana that fully. And it's almost like if CARICOM, one of the things that they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, you want to have a community of nations that will support each other. And Guyana is a big part of that because they have the natural resources that could help support the various energy needs of the Caribbean, where TNT can no longer do so. The financial resources from that, TNT provided financial resources, and perhaps Guyana could do the same when it makes sense. Does it make sense now? When the relationships with Venezuela at times are being prioritized over the relationships of CARICOM members, but yet we also want to have CARICOM. So at this point, I have to ask everybody involved, what is St. Vincent and the Grenadines' priority? Is it Petrocaribe? Is it CARICOM? What is Guyana's priority? What is Barbados' priority? Jamaica's priority? TNT's priority? Now, TNT has it maybe the roughest of all because we actually can't choose one over the other. At least for Dragon, we need both. The Prime Minister has tried to hedge a bet. She said, not supporting regime change. But what the stage we have reached now, it's very difficult to say that the United States administration is not considering regime change. The only thing left is what form. What form? Because they have not deployed enough troops to invade, and taking out Maduro singly will leave a void that might not actually allow for any change to happen. It might just remain the same. Then what would be the point? And in the middle of all this is the fact that, yes, the United States have been conducting airstrikes on boats that are alleged drug smuggling boats with alleged drug smugglers. A situation that is not necessary because in other situations they have arrested people, confiscated boats, taken prisoners, interrogations, compiling evidence, and if necessary, putting those people before international courts or tribunals. Why was that not done here? In the midst of all of the talk about the zone of peace, I think we need to realize, and perhaps maybe this is where some Caribbean leaders are preempting a military action. But military action of a major action of war. But right now what we're getting is really extrajudicial killings. Unless it can be proven otherwise. Under anti-terrorism laws within the US, it might be. I don't know for sure. That's why I say a judge has to sort that out. Because this is what they did against terrorists for years. Obama was, I can't remember the phrase, so I'm paraphrasing, the drone striker in chief. I believe the most drone strikes and the most killings by drone strikes were done under his time as American president. If anything, Trump is just applying pre-existing law and precedents he did not set. And I welcome a judge to sort through this mess because it does seem like extrajudicial killings. If you can't justify it up front, or after the fact, sorry, then we have not just a problem, we already have a problem, we'll have a bigger problem. But there's still a world where they don't go into Venezuela. I honestly think Congress is not going to pass an act of war. The presidency is limited on the troops that it can mobilize, mainly the Marines, which probably is not enough. Therefore, they're hoping to provoke Venezuela to do something, which I don't even know if Venezuela can do anything. to give the United States justification. So there's a part of me that honestly thinks the man in the White House, even he is not really sure of what he is doing right now. He's kind of just winging it. We have to wait and see. There's more to talk about this, of course. We'll have the conversation with Mr. Abdullah tomorrow. We have Digger Martin waiting on the line. My apologies. Digger Martin, good morning. Caller, you on the air.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Sean, I want to put the Venezuelan tension way down the, no, not way down the ladder, but down the ladder. I believe we have a greater problem, immediate problem in Trinidad, and I believe going back at the fourth estate, not highlighting it enough to see where Trinidad is in a precarious position. The president of the Southern Lawyers Association office was firebombed twice, I think 2 weeks apart. And it appears that the TPS hasn't been able to identify that perpetrator of that. I juxtapose that to what our Attorney General has been saying, a type of anarchy in Trinidad and Tobago. Total disregard for law and order. I am hoping that by today or tomorrow, under a state of emergency, the TTPS and some of the sleeping officers find that perpetrator, because law and order has collapsed. When you start to attack offices of the law fraternity, because you went to the law fraternity at UV, they say, look, people, all you have to help us bring back this. And why I'm getting at that, where law and order is in really, really decaying. On the newspaper 2 days ago, you hear where the people who wanted to buy the conglomerate, who wanted to buy the Twin City Mall, has pulled out of it. And in their utterances, what I'm reading through the newspaper, they say because of the criminal investigation. That to me is really, really a surprising, and it leads to all sorts of conspiracy. I want to go back to 2008, 2009, and I want to go back to NIB. NIB lost $625 million in CIB, Clico Investment Bank. That is a lot of money, and that might possibly have triggered the decline in NIB. We had the Clico Coleman report sitting at the DPP for the last 10 years. One of the things is we have to reflect on the directors of CIB in 2008, 2009, around that time, to see who they were. Because when you juxtapose that to the sports company and the fiduciary responsibility of the shareholders, you taking somebody, taxpayers, $625 million, and you had to know that your company is in a state of insolvency. That to me tells me the mindset of the directors at that point in time. And you know, one of the directors at that point in time became Attorney General, and he's the first one to say there is nothing in the Clico report that basically pointed to him. Now, I am hoping that the fact that the new Attorney General is investigating that transaction with, I supposedly call a fire sale, and he start to touch that information on Clico, that he goes right through to find out where all the investigations are, because it's frightening, law and order. And the other thing I want him to touch, you see that arbitration with the ANV issue, where the senior counsel said, no, something is wrong with that arbitration. Then we have to look at, see, the board at that point in time, if they were due diligent in analyzing the arbitration and paying out 97 million, I believe, with the arbitration, when you had 3 audits about the oil that the gentleman who was in question with saying something is wrong with it. So that is another one. And then the other one that is really quenching is Malcolm Jones, where the legal opinion you got, the Privy Council laughed at it. They say we are banana country that accepted the man who say he could prosecute, and then you buy a legal opinion to pull it out. So we have a lot of issues that really impacts on the Trinidad society, law and order, and democracy. The fact is that we're making a lot of issues that the LC said we have to buy it. Trinidad has never gotten anything free from Venezuela. The only people who have gotten free things from Venezuela is the other CARICOM country, the Petro-Caribbean. All of that was the same Trinidad. So, as you rightly say, CARICOM has never been a united front. Trinidad has always basically carried CARICOM left, right, and center. You rightly pointed out, Guyana is the way to go now. In 2030, Guyana aim is to have 1 million tons of rice. 1 million tons of rice. CARICOM carry that as export, but we're supposed to be developing and helping Guyana to help us feed, and they have the energy source that we could all enjoy, but we had to pay for it. There's nothing free in life. I'm going to have a nice morning.
Thank you, Gola. I think some of the things that you're touching on, Mr. Abdullah said something when speaking about the budget. He said we don't have a strong consumer culture, and it got me thinking. I didn't have time to ask him about this because it was going beyond the scope of the conversation with regards to the budget. But I would argue there's a lot of things with regards to our culture. Our culture is great. Our culture is fantastic. Our culture is vibrant, colorful, entertaining, soulful, etc., etc. You know, there's a lot of positives to our culture, but there are aspects of our culture that we did not develop. And perhaps we didn't do it because we didn't need to do it. At times, we potentially didn't want to do it, right? You can't have everything. But just like Mr. Abdullah said, we don't have a strong consumer culture. I would argue, do we have a strong political culture? Not with the politicians, but the public, the voting public. And then by extension, the law and order aspect of our culture. Culturally, do we culturally have the norms and values to say, obey the law, don't quarrel with police officers, don't be a wajang, don't do all of these things that start small, but then could lead to potential arson. The situation with the Assembly of Southern Lawyers, the damage was not bad. Now, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but even if it was intended to just be a display and not necessarily an arson event, you play with fire, you can't control that. And that's essentially what I would argue our society is doing by not taking on certain things. We're playing with fire. We have Faisal on the line. Good morning, call you on the air.
Good morning, Sean. Good
morning.
Sean, I was just doing a little research. And do you remember the invasion of Grenada by the US?
Yeah, well, remember, I think it was a little before my time, but I know of it, yes.
Yes. Okay, and so I want to remind the public, when it went before the General Security Council, 3 countries that vehemently opposed the invasion, one of them being Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, the United Kingdom and Canada. Do you know it was supported by Barbados, Jamaica, St. Lucia, Antigua, Barbuda, and Dominica? So the level of hypocrisy that I'm seeing now, you know, and it's very similar situation. The Venezuelan thing is developing similarly to that what happened in Grenada, because you had the Cubans building the Point Salines airport. And of course, I think they had the air of Maurice Bishop and company, and so America invaded under the instructions of Reagan, citing communism spreading its wings in the Caribbean. So, you know, Trinidad has always been a lone wolf, in my humble opinion.
Yeah.
When it's come to critical matters in CARICOM. I remember, where was the voices when, threats were made to the Essequibo region by the Venezuelans, who said they were going to hold their own elections? What was CARICOM's position then? What was the position with CARICOM when Granger, after the election, kind of refused to recognize the results? The only one who really stood up there, as far as I can recall, would have been the Barbadian Prime Minister, and I think it had to go before the Caribbean Court of Justice, if I am correct. Yeah? So there's a lot of hypocrisy taking place. Everything is willy-nilly and nice when the other CARICOM countries can benefit from Trinidad and Tobago. Anytime that cannot happen, they find that difficult. I was listening to Ralph Gonzalez recently. Unfortunately, we have found ourselves in a foreign exchange bind. And when you listen to these fellows, and I remember the Honorable Patrick Manning giving assistance to build the airport in St. Vincent. When we had the CHOGM, all the vehicles, most of the vehicles were donated to the Grenadians, the Vincentians, and what have you, the Prados. You see what I'm saying, my brother? Hello?
Sorry.
Yeah, so, you know, Trinidad has always been a lone wolf. Take care, my brother. Have a nice day.
Yeah. Sorry, you had me thinking about an article recently with regards to Dr. Gonzalez. Because again, this is what my only issue with wanting a zone of peace is. At what price? At what cost? And who is going to enforce this? He says a zone of peace refers to state actors agreeing not to intervene in or threaten one another. Well, what happens if one party doesn't agree? He says it doesn't apply to drug trafficking, arms dealers, or human traffickers. I'll be honest, perhaps that's a limitation of the law and the mindset in the past that should be updated. I mean, even Venezuela was wanting to say our arms trafficking was upsetting their national governance and government, right? Rebels, we were getting weapons from us. So, funny how, you know, they haven't necessarily shown us more receipts. The whole smuggling situation between Trinidad and Venezuela, part of the issue is most CARICOM nations will have to deal with it, like how we would have to deal with it, or Guyana would have to deal with it. So, I mean, Grenada is an interesting situation, but here's the thing about Grenada. Ironically, it was a much easier situation to deal with. The amount of troops required weren't as much. The potential fallout wasn't as great, right? Because the Grenadian population itself was not that large. The propensity of the instability of Grenada going to the rest of the Caribbean was not that high. Venezuela is different. Venezuela is very, very different. Just because of its population size alone. If Venezuela is not handled properly, the things that we see that are negatives now might get compounded. And the void, because what will happen is, if law and order breaks down further in Venezuela, yes, technically you could make the argument the Venezuelan government, is it legitimate, is it not legitimate, was that last election legitimate, was it basically stolen? The thing is, it's still a government. Even Saddam Hussein was a government in Iraq, right? So there was a certain level of stability that the status quo provided, even though there was a lot of bad things that might have been happening. It's kept below the surface. If you remove the Maduro regime and you cannot replace it in an effective and timely manner, then what will happen is you could see what's happening in Haiti, but at a larger scale. all sorts of criminal enterprise and illegal activity, and international bad actors might now potentially start to use Venezuela as a meeting point, a staging ground, as a place to stash illegal goods, to trade in illegal goods, including weapons. And then, listen, there's always a fear of a certain type of weapon being traded about on the black market, and you don't want it to be traded anywhere near you. If Venezuela destabilizes to a significant extent, far more than anything that we've seen so far, the fallout of that could be very detrimental to us. We already have issues controlling our borders. Imagine now if there's a greater propensity of violent bad actors operating, whether they're Venezuelans or not, they don't have to be Venezuelans, but operating in and around Venezuela. It will have negative effects not just for us, but for Guyana, Colombia, and all of the other countries within traveling distance of a pirogue or a truck, because that's how it will go. If you can't keep your borders secure and keep those elements out, it will affect you. And we know we can't, so it will affect us. We have a Rima on the line. Good morning, caller, you're on the air.
So, Michael Small, good morning.
Morning.
Now, after watching this weekend's No Kings match, I realize Donald Trump is more unpopular than Nicolas Maduro. Whether we want to admit that or not.
From one match?
But it was nice to listen to Ms. Rodriguez's speech yesterday. Yeah. Because she is being real. If our leaders, and well, all the politicians, government and opposition, they didn't understand what that lady is saying, then Venezuela is still willing to negotiate with Trinidad and Tobago. But you have to pay them for the goods. We could take it, because right now I don't think train one is operational. So we would need every molecule of gas that we could get.
Mm-hmm.
And if the Prime Minister wants to, well, it will reduce the budget deficit, that's for sure. If not this year, well, in years to come. And it would benefit Trinidad and Tobago. Now, for me, as I told you yesterday, we don't know how long this grandstanding by the Americans is going to last. Whether they're serious about invading or they're just shocked in the food. But at the same time, our politicians, that's what I spell Saddam backward, because you're getting mad, either mad, and I don't even want to call it on you.
Right, yeah.
And when you watch the behavior of our leaders, you know you understand why Keith Rowley was doing certain things what he was doing. Yeah. And the fact that Stuart Young had to go all this amount of time to negotiate the trips, and so when people jump up and call the dragon is dead, the dragon is dead. They're really looking to rejoice at the country's demise. Now, what we're going on with Nutrien today? Okay, they owe import fees here, but they're not getting a full supply of gas so that they too could be producing at the optimum. So I think common sense should prevail. The Prime Minister should step back, take a deep breath, and think about her actions before going forward, because the Venezuelans are still willing to deal with us. Thank God for that. Have a good day. I will listen to it talk here.
Thank you, caller. I'll say this. I wouldn't necessarily agree that Donald Trump's popularity is less than Maduro's. By all unsubstantiated accounts, Maduro lost that election. Unsubstantiated. We don't have proof, but he lost. It seemed as though he was going to lose by a landslide. Yeah, Donald Trump, his unpopularity will always be limited for two things. One, there's no other politician in America that occupies the pro-people anti-corporations, despite whatever he's been framed as, pro-population, pro-society, anti-politics, anti-political institutions, right? Bernie Sanders could have occupied the same populist space, but he was kicked to the curb by his own party. And then the other thing is the fact that the excesses of the far left, there's the far right, yes, we know what that is. The excesses of the far left sort of hijacked Western society and culture, and the fallout of that is being ever experienced and realized, and it's causing people to kind of pump brakes on certain things. So as crazy as Donald Trump can act, there have been the other side crazy has been at times even worse. So that'll always kind of prop him up. We have Dabadi on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Hi, good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Yeah, let me just say hi to my friend in San Fernando. Sean, it's about the first time I would like to comment on the past callers. And each one of them, they're definitely on target. You know, they on target. I'm talking about with respect to the international relations, foreign relations with both Venezuela and the USA. And their comments are directly on target. Sean, I don't think that Trinidadians and Tobagonians know how serious an issue it is. First, you have to look at the fallout with CARICOM, which have quite a lot of consequences. But the main point I want to raise this morning, though, is that it could happen at any minute. Is the Trinidad and Tobago government preparing the citizens for what can happen if America attacks Venezuela in the morning or midnight tonight, which is quite possible. That is. I know you haven't had time to talk about the budget, but the budget too is also a little scary, and the actions in the parliament right now is not really healthy, as far as I see from either side. So you have a nice day and a wonderful program as usual. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. I wasn't willing to say that the Americans were going to do a thing until I saw more. I've seen enough where you can't say it's unreasonable that the intentions aren't there. But we still, you know, you don't just topple a regime, you know, on a shoestring, right? The force that they have in the Caribbean now is around the same size that they use in Grenada, except Grenada is a lot smaller. It's not the same. It's not going to work the same way, right? And again, I do expect you would potentially, if you want to do it properly, and I'm very loose with the term, right? If you want to try to do it properly, it's so complex, it's very difficult to define what properly is. But part of doing it properly or responsibly, saying that, hey, this regime needs to be changed for the betterment of the people there and the rest of us. You can't just take out the leader and hope for the best of what comes next. You have to go in, ensure the situation isn't destabilized, and ensure that a new government has a chance to succeed and remove all of the corrupt elements. But that is a mountain of a task. It's hardly ever been done successfully without a lot of pre-existing conditions to allow for it. In the few examples that we have where it has been deemed successfully in hindsight. So the risk to us, it's a big variable, and even Dr. Ellis, who is very pro-American, he is an American, part of the War College, Latin American Studies, right? He's pro-American on the issue generally. That is why his warning was the one for me that's like, if he is going to be wary about regime change, the process of it, We need to kind of understand how badly it could go wrong, which I always said up front, but maybe I was not necessarily giving it its due weight in the commentary, right? But we have to wait and see. More assets were committed and more exercises were done, but it's still, a CIA operation implies that they might be doing the one thing Dr. Ellis and I both fear the most, which is you take out Maduro and then you just let whoever come in and hope for the best, and you probably should expect the worst in that case. We have Stan Fan on the line. Good morning, call you on here.
Morning, sure.
Morning.
You know, you said something there that now that it is reasonable to believe that America wants a regime change in Venezuela.
Well, that's...
Is that a public reason? And I'm surprised that you said that in a shot. And let me tell you why. Marco Rubio and President of America, of the United States of America, has said in no uncertain terms that is their intention. In no uncertain terms. So it's not about reasonable to believe, and it's not about how successful it is, and once the United States of America has a plan for regime change and they put it in play, it is for their benefit. It's not for the benefit of the people in the country or the region. It is for what they perceive as their benefit, what their plans are. It's what they did when they did it in Ukraine. It was for their benefit. It wasn't for the Ukrainians. When they did it in Libya and Iraq, it was for their benefit, not for the people of those countries. But look at the state of those countries today. Look at the state of those trees, and I'm just giving you 3. Now, I want to touch on our economy. As I said, more than that, I am surprised that I did not hear anything in the budget or so far in the Standing Finance Committee meeting that they had on our shipbuilding industry. This is there's huge potential in ship repair and shipbuilding in Trinidad and Tobago because we have the know-how. I have heard nothing about Caridoc and us trying to put in a new floating dock in Caridoc. I have heard nothing about the Labre dry docking facility, which is another thing with very, very huge potential for the skill base in Trinidad and Tobago, for foreign exchange earnings in Trinidad and Tobago. These are 2 things that I think they need to should be a priority. As I said yesterday, there seems to have no direction in this budget, no direction for this government. Those are 2 things that they need to put in place. And one thing I want to say, I have not seen a new board appointed for the Environmental Management Authority. And I would urge this government to please put a new board in place for the EMA and a new CEO of the EMA. And get the EMA on board, because the EMA has to this present EMA under this gentleman, I don't think they understand their role. While their role should be in environmental management of the country, it should also be that they try to assist in trying to get our environmental management on a strong footing. They seem to behave as if, and if you could speak to a lot of people in the industry, they seem to behave as if they just are an enforcement agency and not understanding the bigger role in development in Trinidad and Tobago. Have a good day, Sean.
Thank you, caller. I think that last part goes to the fact that individual initiative is not a thing here, right? Particularly in government, public service, what have you. Again, we don't have a consumer culture. I would argue we don't have a political culture. We don't have a law and order culture. We don't have a culture where most people take the initiative to try and figure out what we individually could do within the confines of our own responsibility and authority to help the situation. We don't have that. Now, when I said for the benefit of everybody, that part was me just kind of giving an example. It wasn't speaking about the Americans. It was the theoretical, you know, the starting point of what something should look like with regards to that. I wasn't necessarily speaking about the Americans. But I will say that, yes, I probably didn't describe myself properly, because there's a big difference between Rubio and Trump wanting a thing and America wanting a thing. President Trump wanted it when he was President Trump the first time. He wasn't going to get it, right? It's one thing for him to say it. America is too much of a democracy, especially now, for a dictatorship. No kings, no press, notwithstanding. This is his last term, unless they make some major changes, which the problem is the way how their politics has been going, it has been crazy. It is not necessarily impossible. I would blame both sides for that, to be honest. So it would require more than just him and Rubio to want it, to say America is going to do it, right? Because if you don't have buy-in, the way how their whole culture and military works, if you don't have buy-in, you're going to get messed up situations. You're going to get some FUBAR. You're going to get a repeat. You're definitely going to get a repeat of Afghanistan and Iraq, or worse, Vietnam, or other situations like that. And I don't think Iraq was to the benefit of America. I think Iraq was a conflux of personal and political agendas of the individuals involved at the time. There was no real benefit to America with regards to that invasion, particularly at that time. We do have Sandy Grandi on the line. Caller, good morning. I know we have some comments to get to. We'll get to them before we close the show. Caller, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Morning, morning.
Yeah, I just wanted to share my view on the rental tax. Now,
Right.
it may change as we go along and I see the implementation, but I know some people think it's unfair, but honestly, I think there's a need for some kind of tax system to be in place. So, you know, there are people earning well over $20,000 a year from rent. And in many cases, that's in addition to possibly a pension or sometimes even additional incomes. I understand the issue of inflation eroding at incomes, but I still feel there must be a tax system in place. And when you really look at it, paying 3.5% on rental income for a year does not seem so unreasonable. Now, if my calculation is correct, that's about $700 a year on every $20,000. And to me, it's a fair contribution, also considering that there are people earning way above this amount in rentals per year. Now, I will close off by saying, I think overall, both past and present governments are agreeing that there must be some kind of tax system in place to raise revenue, right? Perhaps with the current government, they are trying to establish who can better pay the that tax and still live comfortably. Now, I'm not saying I'm not saying that my view can't change as I go along and see how this tax plays out, but I think that there must be some sort of tax system in place to raise some kind of revenue in the country. So thanks so much for allowing me to make my contribution, Sean. All
Yes.
the best. Thanks. Bye.
No problem. And so we don't misunderstand each other, your points are very valid. That is the starting point. Now, the first couple of things I'm going to say is just to kind of say that it's not that simple. I do agree with you, though, that we probably should have taxes and something to do with property. And this is the most straightforward way to do it with regards to a property tax, anything within the realm of property tax. It's not without its potential negatives. The first thing is rent is not profit. It's gross revenue. You still have to factor in maintenance, upkeep, and when necessary, renovations and repairs. So it's not that you're just taking home that $20,000 plus a year, right? So renters will have margins. And there will be those renters now who are, the amount of money they're getting is not necessarily that high. Yes, if you're under 20,000, you'll pay less, but under 20,000 for the year, the implication is less than $2,000 a month is what your rent is. Not a lot of places are gonna be less than $2,000 a month, depending, right? So it's not, yes, it will be fine for those situations where it's wealthy and it's corporations that own multiple developments, or wealthy people that have multiple apartments or apartment blocks or what have you. But not all renters are like that, right? And perhaps the criticism should be that they didn't have enough categories to bracket the economics of it, right? To ensure that you don't have people on the margins that are going to suffer unnecessarily and unintentionally. And we do have a caller, but I'll just say this quick, and maybe I'll have a chance to expand it after. It's not even so much about the tax, but rather it is the commentary on how the government framed their view on property tax that makes them look bad in this case, or worse than they needed to be, right? They could have done everything that they did, they could have done if they just communicated better / differently. If they had a different message and if they were more upfront about their intentions, it would look a lot better. They look worse because of how they managed the decisions that they made, not because of the decisions themselves, which is basically a sentiment I said about the PNM as well. We do not show leadership. And there's more I can say about it, but we do have a Claxton Bay waiting. We'll take Claxton Bay. Good morning, caller. You're on the air. Caller? Yeah. Mute your TV.
Good morning, Sean.
Yeah, morning.
Sean, I don't know now. When we continue, I continue to ask myself why we get ourselves into this US-Venezuela thing. We have so much problems here, Sean, in this country to fix so much, right? And the assurance that we get is that they was going to fix it. Yet you're going in somebody else's place now to try to fix them problem, right? And so much that we can't, and you know what, Sean? I trying to understand how we not seeing the Prime Minister. She not coming out and speaking to the population. And another time, we would be calling on Dr. Keith Rowley. Where is him? He's sick. What's the problem? What's going on? We are seeing nothing. Nobody here know what's going on. The last thing we hear is that they make reservation for them to go under the ground or something, and they're telling me stay calm. What is going on? Nobody here know. You understand? Everything just slow down. Everything like it just going right down in the country. We have problems here about Sean and all. They need, I always remember something. Patrick Manning once said, you know what he said? Don't ever believe that here can come like Guyana. You remember that? In the 2010 general election?
Yeah.
And you know the way how things going, like we setting ourselves up for this kind of nonsense, boy. We really don't want that. Why the Prime Minister don't come out and see about the country, come out and speak to the people? That is what we want. She asks for the job, she get the job, and stop lying to the people. Speak to the people, speak truth, so that the people at least will come to some understanding here, but she telling me the truth. This is what we want, Sean. Simple thing. You understand? The economy bad, right? The economy bad. We trying to fix it. Don't be lying to the people. You understand? We fed up on all them things, but Sean, all that is a certain nonsensical thing. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Yeah, that's basically the last part that you made was what I was getting at with regards to the property tax. It's not about the property tax itself. It's about the fact that you went on and on about how bad the property tax was and the PNM, property tax bad, repeal the tax, unjust, brutal, etc., etc., etc. Then you come in. It is technically, as far as I am aware, as the latest sign of it is that technically property tax is still on the books. It hasn't been repealed or removed or whatever, right? It was not necessarily implemented fully by the PNM, so I guess that gives you the room to just say hit a pause and stop. We didn't get refunds on this unjust tax. So the government is indirectly saying they are not going to view it this way, their supporters aren't going to view it this way, but the implication is this is an unjust tax, but we'll keep the unjust money. That's the implication of how they did it. How they did it. That's the implication. It didn't matter if Tanku promised a refund or not. That is the implication of how they did it. Then they come now with their own version of property tax. One part that is a positive also, that might not be said enough, it's not just residential, it's also commercial, which was one of the failings of the previous situation, right? Again, try to analyze everything on its own merits. But the point is, as the caller before said, we probably do need a tax, but it's how you do it, as this caller said. Things are bad, tell us they're bad. Be upfront about it. Manage our expectations properly. Don't manage our expectations by saying everything's going to be all right. We're going to figure it out. Notice, that's basically a complaint I had with former Minister of Finance Carl Mimbit, wanting to be so positive about everything all the time. When we're like, no, this SNP thing, that's not a good sign. It's not a good sign. Don't call it a good sign. And it's the same thing. Stop telling the people, we'll figure it out, when the means of you figuring out is dipping back into the well of ideas that potentially got the PNM voted out in the first place because they themselves didn't manage the expectations of the population properly. So from my point of view, it's not just what the UNC is doing. It's the fact that what they're doing is unfortunately basically the same thing the PNM did. And in both cases, one could make a case that it's not even the actual policies that they implemented, but how they communicated those policies. Not the policy itself, but how they implemented it, the rollout, the methodology, how they managed expectations, the lack of leadership. And here's where, over time, if this trend potentially, if it's a trend continues, say what you want. Dr. Keith Rowley, while yes, we could say he was on the golf course, some people would say he's lazy, X, Y, and Z. What am I supposed to say when myself and others are saying, hey, in this important situation, where is the Prime Minister? The person actually voted in to actually lead us. I don't know if a minister in the office of the Prime Minister is not the Prime Minister. I don't know who might consider it otherwise, but hey, let's not forget, the election was basically a referendum of that very fact. What is good for the goose is good for the gander. The minister in the office of the Prime Minister is not just automatically the Prime Minister in waiting, the next Prime Minister, the acting Prime Minister, the presumptive Prime Minister, for all intents and purposes, the Prime Minister. It's not that. It is a junior minister in a subordinate role, but the Prime Minister is one and only. There is no substitute Prime Minister. We got tired of it then. Why would we accept it now? Just want to touch on this one point. Mr. San Fernando pointed out his disappointment with the EMA, and I would argue, yes, the EMA. It and issues that it governs seemingly never a priority. Ever. Ever. And that, I would argue, is a failure of our culture and a lack of political and societal will to do the right thing. Back to the whole, we are not a culture of law and order. We are not a culture of law and order. Think about it. We're not. That is not part of our cultural makeup. Precision, on time, don't litter in the streets, obey traffic laws. This is not something that you would say, oh, all Trinis do that. Here's the thing though, to Claxton Bay, the US-Venezuela thing, or the Venezuelan thing is causing us problems. It is right for us to demand that the effects that are being inflicted on us end. Right? It is right for us to do so. How we do so is a whole other story. Because I would argue The actual intentions of the Prime Minister, based on the content of what she said, based on the actual words most of the times that speak to specific policy positions, that's fine. It's how she frames it otherwise that obfuscates the whole situation and confuses the matter. Because if you just go with the words, we want to deal with the drug smuggling, we don't want regime change. That's the Prime Minister. If you go by the vibes, empty the matic, shoot them up. And that implies, even though it's not expressed, even though it's contradicted by the actual words, it implies further support for what the Americans are doing. And that's where you have the disconnect, right? Before I say the last thing I want to say, let's go with the comments quick. This is from yesterday. Sorry that we didn't get to this. I get it. I understand. 9 years with the last PN administration, 54 years, economic booms, etc., etc. Let's not forget the People's Partnership had an economic boom. Let's not forget that, right? Tax on income earned is not property tax. Listen, I get it, but functionally speaking, it's within that space, right? Yes, technically speaking, it's not property tax, but don't lose me now on the semantics, please. Why no mention made about rich landlords and etc., etc. Listen, that's fine. All of that is fine. I get it, but here's the problem. It's not that there is something that looks like a property tax. It's how they spoke about the concept of property tax. And now, it's hard not to say this is a 6 for a 9. It's similar in vein, and they compound each other, by the way, with the whole Dragon Gas situation. You could have criticized the PNM over Dragon Gas and not made it a political bubble issue, because now that you want Dragon Gas, you look like a bubbly. Let's go with the other comment quick. There's a couple of things in it. Right, so each government should have banking facilities to truly serve the citizens. Technically, there's First Citizens Bank. It's not that simple at the end of the day. It's not that simple, right? When the travel government try to give services, there will always be issues with that. In part, the inefficiencies, right? But also, let's not forget, we have questions about corruption in government and the public service and what have you. So good intentions of the government could easily, and at times you could argue almost always, be undermined and eroded by corruption. Constructing affordable, readily available housing units is one way governments worldwide can achieve acceptable inflation, many benefits. I don't know if I agree with that per se, because the inflation you could get from a government project that costs spiral out of control might be much worse than if it was the private sector doing it. The unemployed can always meet the basic cost of, grammar on the last one, I'm not going to try to interpret that all the time. We can look at the systems to cut expenses. Example, WASA bottling drinking water for sale, government providing vehicle insurance. Again, private institutions do it. If WASA did it, the price of water might go up by $1, right? If government provided vehicle insurance, the premiums might be more expensive, just because of the inefficiencies. Also, don't underestimate the lack of institutional knowledge, because then you're going to have, listen, we already have a Minister of Finance that isn't really a finance guy. At least we did. We have one that has a bachelor's in economics. I don't know if I'd call him a finance guy, right? Which is not impossible. But the point is this, government has to oversee too many things that it has no actual institutional knowledge of. It wants to oversee tourism and have tourism company and tourism ministries. Government has very little institutional knowledge of tourism, right? And you could say for a lot of different private industries. So to say WASA is going to provide bottled water, WASA needs to be fixed first before we could try to expand that, because any initiative like that will be undermined by WASA's own inefficiencies, which is there, no matter what the PSA wants to admit, it's there. But it's not necessarily within to their benefit to fix those things, based on the commentary by most union leaders. That is the implication of their words. Right. The last thing I want to say before we close the show, because we have to go, the current UNC government, arguably the cabinet and the structure of it, one could argue was built on the fly. Not all of the members of the opposition came into the new government. Of course, there were the dissidents, and that was that whole drama. But even then, certain individuals, Kamala Persad moved on from, right, as political leader of the UNC before she became prime minister. And new people were brought in. And some of those new people were heralded as positive signs. But here's the thing. That whole thing about having your cake and eat it too, the problem is, I think this government is not necessarily optimized for every situation. It's optimized potentially to beat the PNM in the last election. It's optimized to some extent to try to deal with certain domestic issues. But when you have certain politicians, certain ministers in certain ministries making comments about Delcy Rodriguez, who is now essentially basically saying, and here is the price for your social media rants, sir. This is potentially just the beginning. You're going to have to pay. We are in the position to demand from you. You want to rant on us? We will demand our pound of flesh in terms of hard currency from you. In fact, I could argue our political system itself, and more importantly, not the system, but the environment that we, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and all of our politicians throughout the years, and all of our people have fostered, does not lend itself to be good at certain things. And international politics is probably not one of them. The PNM at times look better, but I could argue they still have their limitations as well. And at a time when the international politics is probably even more at the forefront than ever before, well, I guess, you can't have everything. We'll see how this turns out. There's more to say, but I don't have time to say it. Thanks to all the callers, thanks to the commenters. Thanks to David Abdul for joining me. And again, we'll have part 2. We'll go further into the whole US-Venezuela thing, how he sees it, how I see it, and we'll meet in the middle. Until then, stay safe. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Always remember, it's nice to be nice. We will see each other tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Good day and welcome to this week's episode of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. I am your host, Rondell Dono, attorney at law. Once again, I'm happy to be alive. I'm happy to bring the law and